Britain will have a new Prime Minister on Monday, and though he hasn't made any formal announcements, we're starting to get a picture via various briefings of what Andy Burnham wants to do. The Times reports today the idea of a wealth tax is very much in play. Briefings that Shabana Mahmood could be Chancellor have pleased the markets, but one of the more controversial proposals is a number 10 of the North. The Times reports this morning that it could cost tens of millions of pounds in taxpayer money to achieve. Times Radio's newsroom reporter Ollie Cole got the story and joins us in the studio now. Good morning, Ollie.
Good morning.
So we've talked a little bit about the idea of a number 10 for the North, but do we know what it actually would look like and be, and crucially, how much it would cost?
So interestingly, and this is where it differs from a lot of previous sort of restructuring of governments, which is there's, a Treasury campus in Darlington, there's various bits of government infrastructure around the country, but a lot of that is essentially not a decision-making unit. A lot of it is putting civil servants in different places so that they get, a bit of a closer view on the ground of the effects and implementation of their policies. Whereas what Andy Burnham seems to be wanting to do is move part of the actual Downing Street operation into Manchester and work from there at least one day a week. Apparently, we also hear that he wants to live in his Wigan constituency for part of the week, and his wife wants to stay there as well. And all of that obviously comes with a bit of more of a headache, because you've got, essentially, as it was put to me by one official, that Downing Street tends to be, most prime ministers, they come in, you've only got to think about the security of one place, one street, one building for most of a prime minister's term in office, whereas this means that you're going to have to secure a whole new location in a different way. So you've basically got tens of millions of pounds. That's the financials that have been put together by officials on Whitehall. They've sent it to the Cabinet Secretary, Antonia Romeo, and she is now looking at the implementation of that. You've also got having to move a sort of permanent civil service out to Manchester, and there's a question there of how many people they can get to actually move. So permanent secretaries are trying to draw up a list of people at the moment.
Some staff wouldn't want to leave London.
Well, exactly, and there is always a difficulty here, because the thought of devolving and moving places like this is that it creates a new local economy for wherever you're going to. But the truth is, you can't move a Downing Street operation north if you don't know people who know how to run government already. So you've got to move them there in the first place. There's been some resistance. You've got permanent secretaries across different departments trying to draw up people who wouldn't mind moving in the first instance, and sort of scrabbling around trying to find those people to move. And as I said, the difference with the Darlington Treasury, for example, is that a lot of that was a relocation, and it was supposed to create a new economy in Darlington, but actually it hasn't, because COVID happened. Most people ended up working from home, and most people ended up not being in an office there in the first place. So there are huge practicalities as they talk with the Cabinet Office and the Cabinet Secretary, Andy Burnham's team, over what his plan for government means, how much it is actually going to cost the taxpayer. Now, one person who's seen that document tells me, tens of millions of pounds. Is there a real price tag you could put on government moving around the country in a slightly different way and not operating solely from London? They're not sure it is, but they have seen that document. They've had to submit it to the Cabinet Secretary, and the taxpayer will have to judge whether that is value for money at all.
Ollie Cole, thank you very much for running us through the story. Well, those are the practicalities, that the moving and the costs. How could it actually work? Would it actually work? Simon Kaye is the Policy and Research Director at Restate, and he's been looking at the plan with an eye of optimism, I think it's fair to say, Simon.
Yeah, I think a degree of optimism, and optimism can be challenging in these moments. I'm not just talking about the football when I say that, but at the moment I feel like we're being shown the bill for a set of plans, before we have any idea what those real plans actually are, what the operating model will really be. And it's going to be incumbent on the incoming Burnham administration to quickly demonstrate to us why they think this is going to be worth doing, why it can be got up and running in a speedy way, and why it's going to make a difference to the way that Whitehall functions. Because in the end, if it doesn't shift Whitehall proper, if it's just escaping Whitehall rather than helping to transform it, it's not going to be worth doing.
And so actually, interestingly, it's that you say escaping, because some of our listeners are already saying, Wendy, for example, says, I live in Yorkshire, it won't benefit us or the rest of the North East. It sounds like a convenience for Burnham himself. How could it work? What would you say Andy Burnham and his team would need to do to make it a genuine shift of democracy?
I think that's the key question, and Wendy's absolutely right. There's no intrinsic reason why anyone in Newquay or Newcastle would feel more represented by an office in Manchester than they do by one located in London. So I think this is all about following through on the headlines, and it really was just the headlines that we heard from the incoming Prime Minister in his big speech. I say big speech; it wasn't that long, a couple of weeks ago, where he said this is going to become the nerve centre for a new kind of bit of Whitehall, an extended prime ministerial office that's going to drive forward on those key priorities that he identified, things like reindustrialisation, achieving growth across the country, and creating a more decentralised and devolved system. But I can't emphasise enough, if this is going to be about taking a slice of central government and giving it a different postcode, that's still central government. That's not the same as devolving the system. If it's going to operate differently, use that distance as an opportunity to shift the way that Whitehall works, try new things, and engage with devolved systems in a different way, that is worth looking at.
And what would that mean, just finally? I mean, we're talking about kind of engaging differently and reshaping the system. Can you give us a tangible example of what a Prime Minister might be able to do in a short space of time to start that process?
Well, the short space of time, that's the big trick, isn't it? And I completely accept that that's going to be part of the challenge here. But we always say, I mean, we've been advocating for big shake-ups to the Whitehall system at Restate for a very long time now, as have many others. And we always say the best time to start was probably 5 years ago. Second best time to start would be yesterday. So why not get moving today, even if there are only 2 or 3 years left realistically on the clock for Andy Burnham? So what could they do that makes a difference? They could genuinely change the way that Whitehall interacts with local government and with regional governments. And Andy Burnham's pretty well positioned to try and do that. But I think that means extending the prime ministerial office in order to create a bit of a counterweight to other parts of the Whitehall system, a counterweight to Treasury, which people usually say is overmighty in these areas, doesn't really always understand the case for devolution or for fiscal devolution. A stronger delivery unit located in a place where there's less sort of leaning over, a bit of a cluster of other departmental fiefdoms within the area as well. A little bit more of that strategic element could actually give a lot of conditions that you need to push forward with an agenda that's quite instinctively unpopular with the average Whitehall civil servant.
Well, there's a lot to think about. Simon, thanks very much. That's Simon Kaye.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Head of Policy and Research at Restate. And before that, Ollie Cole.